Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you with us. Over the past few years, we've become accustomed to talking about artificial intelligence as something that improves productivity, automates tasks, and changes the way organizations operate. Today, we're talking about something much bigger. We're talking about AI changing the balance between attackers and defenders. We're talking about security leaders rethinking assumptions they've held for years. And we're talking about organizations, what they need to do next. When we first started planning today's webinar, one thing became immediately clear. This wasn't going to be a discussion about AI or another discussion about zero trust. It's going to be a conversation about how AI is changing the assumptions we've built cybersecurity around. And that's what makes today's discussion so unique. We're bringing together two leaders who have approached that challenge from very different but highly complementary perspectives. One fundamentally changed the way our industry thinks about trust, and the other is helping organizations operationalize those principles through AI powered security operations. So rather than presenting to you today, we're inviting you to that conversation. Before we begin, let me introduce you to today's panel. My name is Diana Gomez, and I'm the Vice President responsible for GRC, PMO, and ServiceNow here at Bell Cyber. My role gives me the opportunity to work with organizations as they navigate governance, cyber resilience, operational risk, and increasingly, the responsible adoption of AI. Today, I'll have the pleasure of moderating our discussion. I'd like to introduce you to two individuals who have shaped different but highly complementary parts of modern cybersecurity. First, John Kinderberg. John Kinderberg is widely recognized as the creator of Zero Trust Model Cybersecurity, a framework that has fundamentally changed how organizations around the world think about trust, identity, and resilience. John Kinderberg continues to work today as the chief evangelist at Illumio, helping organizations evolve zero trust for today's rapidly changing threat landscape. John, welcome.
Thank you.
I'd also like to present the president and CEO of Bell Cyber, John Menezes. John Menezes has spent more than a decade helping build one of Canada's leading managed security organizations and is now leading Bell Cyber's vision for autonomous security operations, sovereign AI, and the future of cyber defense. John, it's great to have you here with us.
Thanks, John. That's great fun.
Thank you both for joining us today. Before we jump into the discussion, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you require live interpretation, please select your preferred language using the interpretation menu on your screen. Once selected, your audio will switch automatically, and I'll give everyone a few seconds to do that. While you set up your interpretation preferences, I'd also like to encourage everyone to use the chat throughout today's discussion. If questions come to your mind, please post them as we go. We'll leave time towards the end of today's session to answer as many as we can. And with that, let's begin. As we look at today's agenda, I don't really see 6 separate topics. I just see one story. We're going to begin by talking about why this conversation has become so urgent. We'll explore how quickly the threat landscape is changing. We'll discuss why zero trust has become more relevant in an AI-enabled world. And finally, we'll bring those ideas together into what practical leadership looks like. John, I'd like to begin with John Menezes. Sorry, I'll have to use last names as well. I'd like to begin with you. When we're preparing for today's discussion, what is one of the themes that kept coming up was we cannot wait any longer and the pace of change. What changed over the last 6 months that convinced you that this conversation couldn't wait any longer?
I think it's not the last six. It's not the last 6 months. It's actually since the advent of generative AI and the ChatGPT, and then in the last year we're seeing AI agents coming about, and then of course the last few months with the release of Mythos and Anthropic saying that we've created this model that is so disruptive and disruptive. It just everything is moving so quickly, and what we are seeing with every new model that's coming out, the change is not incremental, it's exponential. And so things are moving really quickly. And then finally the Five Eyes came out with an advisory saying, the timeline, as you see in the slide, the timeline is not years, it is months. And AI is not a future consideration, it is already so everything is that's just the way it's happening. What do you think, John?
Well, what's happening is that the time that it takes to find a vulnerability has increased from sometimes years to weeks to seconds, right? And so as soon as you find a vulnerability, then the attackers have a playbook to create an exploit around it. And if you don't have controls in place that protect the data that you don't want to see get into the hands of a malicious actor, or protect the assets that you don't want to see disrupted by the malicious actor, you don't have time to mitigate that in the traditional way, such as a patch, right? I mean, patching takes forever. We're seeing breakout times of 51 seconds. So in 51 seconds, you can't open a change control ticket. Think about that, right? And hackers don't have change control. Hey, I just tried to hack Bell Cyber. When's my next hacking window? It didn't work. It doesn't work that way, right? I mean, it's just on constantly. And now with agentic AI, we're seeing that people can set up, swarms of hackers to do what a human being used to do. So we've moved from the human into the machine world, and I often quote a line from the movie The Imitation Game about Alan Turing leading the effort to break the Nazi Enigma code, where he said, what if only a machine can defeat another machine? We have to build these AI-enabled machines that defeat this particular machine that's attacking us, because it's doing it too fast. Human beings cannot stop it. It's going to have to come down to technology.
I was going to just comment on that. I think one of the things that has come out really in this discussion is the asymmetry between the attackers and the defenders. Attackers operating in seconds, and organizations still, responding in hours, days, and sometimes even weeks. So, John Menezes, from your perspective, how has AI simply made attackers faster, and how has it fundamentally changed the economics of cyber attacks?
So the attackers are operating, without any guardrails. They're operating without any controls. And while we, as the defenders, we have all these guardrails, we have all this governance around us and stuff like that. And just the incident with OpenAI's, hacking of Hugging Face just last couple of days, and the fact that the American LLMs weren't able to help alleviate the challenges that Hugging Face was having, and they had to go to a Chinese open source LLM to help them, just shows that we in North America we have significant restrictions in place that are hampering us in our ability to defend ourselves. And the way things are going is, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. So we have to learn to defend ourselves with, I believe, is with one arm tied around our back. And we'll have to figure out a better way to do that, because I don't think we can win the battle the way it's being played out now. And what we saw in the last couple of days kind of validates this kind of thinking. The hackers have always been 2 steps ahead of us, but now they're going to have tools that are more advanced than we have, and it's just going to make our life even more difficult.
And you know,
Right.
John, it brings up another question, because here in the West, where you and I live, and maybe a lot of these people are, you know, we have ethical concerns about um, artificial intelligence technology that are valid, right? They're not invalid. It's not being stupid, but in other parts of the world, they don't have any ethical concerns about it. And so they're not trying to make any type of ethical AI. They're not trying to make any ethical guardrails. So when you talk about one hand tied behind our backs, I think that's a valid criticism. But on the other hand, you know, how do you responsibly use this technology moving forward so it doesn't become self-aware and create terminators, and you know, we have to go back in time and start, you know, assassinating people who created these things. You know, I mean, how do we do that, John? How do we balance out this idea behind we live in a world of ethical systems, and we're fighting against people who don't have ethical systems in their culture?
You know, and that's a valid point, but that problem has existed, you know, even before, not just with AI. You know, there are lots of other things that you know, others don't have ethical controls on, and while we do. I think it's going to be something like you know, a global. It's almost like the non-proliferation treaty for nuclear weapons. You know, everybody got together and said, you know what, we think this is how we're going to manage it and control the spread of nuclear weapons, and they came up with this treaty. I think the way we are going, you will need some sort of government level, some sort of controls. But then, you know, at the same time, we're sometimes afraid of giving the government too much control over some of these technologies. But I'm thinking that's kind of where it's going to go.
Yeah. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but you said such a profound thing there that I wanted to kind of pull the string on that a little bit, you know?
John, I'm full of profound things today, you know.
I think John Kinderberg, the next couple of questions I have are going to be really for you. And I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring zero trust because I think it's incredibly relevant to what we've been discussing so far about controls and asymmetry and things like that. And one thing I've always appreciated about your work is that zero trust has never been presented as a product, but as a way of thinking. And you've often said that zero trust is something you do, not something you buy. So 15 years after introducing zero trust, how has frontier AI changed all of that? Perhaps more importantly, what hasn't changed? And how should senior leaders who are sitting in organizations trying to navigate all this upheaval, move forward? What are some golden principles that, you'd want to share with them?
Yeah, zero trust, and we're coming up on 17 years in September, actually. So, but it's zero trust has its driver's license now. But the nothing has changed strategically. You know, the concepts haven't changed. The need for it hasn't changed. What AI has become is the forcing function to force people to adopt it. People have been dragging their heels. They knew they needed it, but oh yeah, that seems like kind of difficult. And now with AI, I mean, the number of calls I'm getting where we have to do this now because of AI, because of Mythos, this post Mythos world we're living in, because of the speed of discovering vulnerabilities, because we have these flat networks that allow anybody who gets onto them to get access to everything on them and just toast us. Those are things that are forcing people to adopt zero trust. So zero trust doesn't have to evolve. You know, I think everybody who is deep into it understands that zero trust was prepared for this because it was concerned about what you need to protect, not what types of attacks were coming. And so when we understand what that the controls, of course, are going to change. The technology was going to get better and better. The strategy stays the same, like all good strategies do. We still talk about Sun Tzu. We still talk about Clausewitz. We still talk about great strategies. But the technologies that you use to fight wars have advanced, and we're in a cyber war right now, and the technologies have advanced. AI is a cyber war technology, and we have to have cyber war technologies to defend against that, and they use zero trust principles, kind of like what you're building over there at Bell Cyber, John.
And that's
Yeah,
a great segue, because I was actually going to ask John, is this your view of how do you think that this philosophy that John Kinderberg has described really is shaping how we are developing and implementing our autonomous SOC strategy?
I think zero trust is a great concept that we have been slow to adopt. Okay, and I think the reason for that is we've looked at zero trust as a technology, and some of the others are, I need to go out and buy something to implement zero trust and do something, when really it's a case of a philosophy and understanding, who needs access to what data within your organization, and one of the reasons that we haven't done that is because we don't really know, who needs access to what data, when they need access to what data, and sometimes it's been left to the IT people to figure out, who needs access to the data, when really it should be a case of the business. The business should decide, this is our data, and it should be only these people should have access to it, and these people should not have access to it, and then implementing systems to control it. Have been difficult, haven't been easy, and so when we're looking at it from an autonomous SOC perspective, we're trying to say, okay, how can we use the autonomous SOC as a way to supplement systems where it's not actually clear. So can we look at who's accessing data, when are they accessing data? Maybe then can we control it? Can we turn systems on and off? Can we turn access on and off? Because today you either have it or you don't have it, but maybe you need to say, okay, you know what? You have it from 8:30 to 5, and after that you don't have it. And you have it when you're sitting in your office, physical office, you have it. If you're working from home, you don't have it. So all these concepts within our autonomous system with AI is making it easier for us to be able to do stuff for that. And I think that will just make the operation of this zero trust easier to implement, even if you don't have all the controls in place that you should have when accessing data.
Okay, and I think that leads us well into the next section of our discussion is zero trust in the AI era. John Kinderberg, one of the statements that jumps out to me on this slide is really assume breach. That was a bold statement, a few years ago, but today it seems inevitable. Every organization has accepted the fact that, at some point or the other, they would be vulnerable to a breach. And they are racing down this path to define those protect surfaces so that they can, reduce the time of the impact and be up and running. So what advice can you give these organizations, and how can they take this 5-step methodology and really execute a zero trust strategy on that?
Yeah, a lot of people make zero trust out to be way more complicated than it actually needs to be. And I don't understand that. A lot of people that I talk to go, well, I don't understand that either. But it's very simple. There's these 5 steps: define the protect surface, map the transaction flows, understand how the system works together as a system. Then you figure out what technology that you can buy. That's really where the fundamental problem is. We're an acquisition culture. We're used to buying products, right? And so we focus on products, but products only exist to enforce policy. And that's step 4, define the policy. The reason we have to have products is to enforce policy. It would be wonderful if we could enforce policy without products, right? But we can't. And we have to have very granular policy that starts with a default deny and then just allows people to have access to those resources. Just like you said, John, no one should have access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I was doing breach response, I would look at attack logs or just look at logs, and I could see when our people went home for the day and when the foreign nation state came in hours later, and I could see when they took their coffee break and their lunch break, right? Because but nobody was monitoring that at that time, and so you end up with these attackers inside our environments, and we don't know they're there, right? I mean, you live in Canada. There used to be a company called Nortel. I used to do a lot of business with them, and they got hacked out of business. I mean, they didn't know that the attackers had been in there for 30 years. And so you have to have that kind of visibility. But the reason policy becomes so important is because if you don't have good policy, you're really toast, right? And so I say all bad things happen inside of an allow rule. If a bad thing happens to your organization, you had a rule in place that allowed it. And that's a hard pill for some people to swallow. But we just have a lot of open policies. We'll try to let everybody in and stop the bad stuff, right? Playing whack-a-mole. You must have whack-a-mole up there in Canada, right, John?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. You've never won a game of whack-a-mole, have you? No one ever has. Never won a game of whack. You can't win it at that. So you just allow the good stuff in and by default deny everything else. And that solves a whole lot of problems. And then you got to monitor and maintain. You got to send all that telemetry to some sort of analytics engine, some sort of security operations centers. You know, I covered SOC at Forrester. I came up with the concept of the virtual SOC. And I've been doing SOC operations my whole career. And, you know, what's changing now with AI is that you can understand the context of it, where in the past we couldn't. When I started out, I used to say every SOC analyst is colorblind, because you end up chasing your tail that all those red alerts look green and you just quit actually trying to go out and do things. Now we can have machines that go out and understand the context of the bidirectional traffic flow and understand how all these things fit together, and then can give us either real insights or can actually make a real decision to stop what's clearly bad traffic. It's pretty easy for these systems to know that should never have access to our protect surface, right? No unknown IP address on the public internet should have access to our financial database. That should never happen in any instance, right? And so we can start to solve these problems. But if you follow these 5 steps, it's just going to make it easier for you to be successful. A lot of people make it really, really complex. I don't understand why they do that, but I don't think they've done much zero trust work. I mean, this comes out of real world doing the stuff and saying, what lessons did I learn building zero trust environments in the early years when no one else was doing it, and how can I put them together in a way that's easy to understand, easy to follow, so that you can have a pathway to success that's simple and understandable.
I think also, to add to that, I think we talk about this concept of assume breach. And I personally feel that, you know, people pay lip service to assume breach. You know, people say, you know, everybody's going to be breached, everybody's going to be hacked. But I think every CISO is mortified and petrified of being hacked, because he's afraid that he gets hacked, you know, he's going to get fired. And so this concept of assume breach, you know, for us professionals, you know, it's nice that I can say, hey, you know, assume breach. But does the board of directors of any organization assume breach? And I don't think so. I don't think so. So yeah, you know, we want people to assume. So what we're asking security professionals to do, and what we're asking everybody to do is a mindset change. And that I feel is probably the most difficult thing that we have. It's a mindset. I'm asking somebody, who spent, 10, 15, 20 years on prevention, and I'll never be breached, and if I get breached, I'm going to get fired. So I had defense in depth strategies, and I bought different firewalls and different IPSs, and I spent all my time buying technology. That's exactly an acquisition. That's the other thing. We're not implementing zero trust because there's no magic tool that I can go out and buy and say, hey, I bought this and I can now implement zero trust. So with a mindset change and no tool available, are we making the life of the CISO even more difficult? Can't we go and give them a tool that we can say, hey, go buy this tool and you got zero trust implemented?
I wish there was a silver bullet, right? I have a whole speech called Killing Vampires about how there's no silver bullet because some vampires you have to kill with a silver bullet. Some need holy water, some need a mirror, some need sunlight, some need the stake, some need the cross, right? So even within vampire killing, if you've ever seen a vampire killing kit, if you ever go to New Orleans, go to one of the voodoo shops and they'll have a vampire killing kit there, and you'll go, oh, wow, killing just one vampire is really hard because you don't know, is it a Croatian vampire? Is it a Bohemian vampire? Is it an English vampire? I mean, there's different ways that you have to kill them. So you'll never have a tool that is just the perfect silver bullet. That's just not going to happen. But it's still not hard to use technology to build this because you already have lots of tools, right? John, you know this as much as I do. I have one customer that has 11 hops to the internet because they're trying to just control outbound traffic. I mean, it's an incredibly cumbersome environment, but they just keep buying more stuff, right? My friend Rick Holland has a concept called expense in depth. That's the opposite of defense in depth. It's that we spend money on things we don't have on things we don't need because we don't know what we're supposed to protect in the first place. So if you understand what you need to protect, that will tell you, those first two steps will tell you, I know what I need to protect. I know how it works, and it will tell you exactly what control I need to protect that.
Absolutely. But by the way, we have an attendee who's an expert on vampires, and he says a silver bullet is for werewolves. So there we go.
Well, that's what people have told me, but then I did a bunch of research and I found out there were some vampires that do get killed by silver bullets. But certainly werewolves, werewolves are easier to kill because the silver bullet gets most werewolves. So
there we go. Okay,
All
Diana,
right.
I digress.
That's fine. That's okay. I think we've talked a good deal about the strategy, and now we really need to move into the product. As John was mentioning, it's really about getting all the information that you need and then implementing that strategy. But then how do you implement it successfully? And that's where segmentation fits in. So, John Kinderberg, I have a question for you. You've been talking about the strategy, and now we need to translate that strategy into execution. And can you explain to everyone here how does segmentation fit within the overall zero trust strategy?
Right. Well, when you're creating a protect surface, right, you have to figure out how to create what we call a micro perimeter around it. So you instead of having a big perimeter, you have a micro perimeter, a small perimeter around the thing you're protecting. And to do that, you have to segment that protect surface, those data or assets or whatever they are, from everything else. And the way you do that is through segmentation technology, right? So the second report I ever wrote was called Build Security into Your Network's DNA. And in that, I said new ways of segmenting networks must be created because all modern networks must be segmented by default. What I was seeing as a pen tester was, I'm in a flat network, I can go anywhere. I can go from the phone system directly into the financial database. That's really dangerous because it was unsegmented. And so even about 2 weeks ago, I did a webinar with a gentleman in England who does breach response and ransomware negotiation. And every single one of his clients in the last year have been on flat networks. So flat networks are dangerous. If you have a flat network, the attacker owns the network, but you just pay the bills because they're moving around and you don't know where they are. That's why we have dwell time, right? Think about the concept of dwell time. Why does dwell time exist? Because we don't have any visibility into the traffic moving in and out of the thing we're actually trying to protect. And so that's why we have to do segmentation. And that's why I came to Illumio, because I wrote that report 3 years before Illumio was even created. But as I looked at the landscape, the next thing I was at a SOC company similar to what you do, John. And after I got that built, I wanted to do something that would extend zero trust more easier to the average person. And that's why I chose to come to Illumio. And it's great to have Bell Cyber as a partner with Illumio, helping people understand just how easy it is to segment these networks so that you can create the protect surfaces, you can visualize all the traffic flows, step 2, and then begin the architectural process just by deploying the technology that gives you the visualization.
And John Menezes, I guess, from your perspective, from the Bell Cyber overview, how do you see segmentation really complementing modern security operations?
One of the key, so the two things. We talked about assume breach. Okay, we talked about assume breach. So one of the first things you got to talk about assume breach. The next thing you talk about is reduce the blast surface, or the blast radius. So if you're going to assume breach and you want to reduce the blast radius, then you got to have stuff like microsegmentation. And microsegmentation is probably the best way to reduce to limit the blast radius. So
Okay.
you got to do this. You got to do this. You got to enforce least privilege. But all these things, I think it's the easiest way if you really adopt the concept of assume breach, then microsegmentation is a foundational element of that.
And I think that really summarizes the conversation that we're having so far. It's like, segmentation doesn't replace detection. We still need the SOC operations to do all of that work, but it gives detection time to work because, we control the blast radius. And that kind of takes us into the next topic that we're going to talk about is the blast radius problem. And this is actually my favorite topic in this presentation because it's very easy to explain and it's very visual. And without segmentation, we have one compromised system. It becomes an enterprise-wide event. But with segmentation, the blast radius is dramatically reduced, and we have time to work on controlling things before they get out of control. So John Kindervag, when organizations first see this visual, what do you think they think? What surprises them the most? What are some misconceptions they have? Like, walk us through some of those interpretations that, since you worked with so many organizations that are trying to fix this problem.
Well, there's a couple of things about segmentation that are pretty important. One is, you're segmenting things away from each other, right? Which is really something that you have to do. I mean, I have a 14-month-old grandson. My house is now segmented. I've got gates all over the place, right, to keep him from going in and out. And the gates have little holes, sliding doors, so my cats can go through the gates, right? So I'm allowing the right user, a cat, to go into that room, but I'm keeping the dangerous user, my grandson, out of that room, right? Because it's dangerous to him. It's dangerous to me if something happens to him. So we have to start thinking about who is the right resource that gets at, or the right user, the who statement, in a Kipling method policy, who, what, when, where, why, and how, gets access to this protect surface. And by segmenting, we can control access inbound, but we can also control access outbound. So everybody always says to me, well, John, what about, if somebody gets in when they put the ubiquitous thumb drive in there, like in Mission Impossible or something. Well, there's still no rule that allows unknown software on our system to connect to an unknown resource, the command and control out on the public internet. So it's blocked going outbound too. So it works bidirectionally here. And so you can contain the blast radius that way. And so, so something does get infected. There's a malware thing that hits one system. It only hits the one system. It doesn't destroy everything else in your environment. Whereas in traditional flat networks, once it's in there, it just goes everywhere. So you saw WannaCry using SMB ports that were open, and of course all SMB ports are open. So it's just going everywhere, and it's like a cancer that took over your entire body in 1 second, versus having some way to control the outbreak of the cancer to one specific part of your body. And I think that's what we need to do. I mean, in the military, they're very concerned with how do we control blast radius. They build blast walls and do all kinds of things so that even if there is an attack, it's limited to a certain spot, and fewer people are injured and fewer things are destroyed.
And I think, John Menezes, I want to just, approach it by this discussion. We've talked about two main pillars over here, really the ability to detect faster, the asymmetry in that with the attackers, just being so quick, and the ability to reduce the blast radius. When you are talking to organizations and they are competing with these multiple priorities, the ability to detect faster, protect faster, and also reduce the blast radius, how do you advise them on how to, go forward in that strategy?
I don't think it's an either or. I think it's both. Okay, so you got to, in the world of AI, and we just talked earlier about the fact that the breakout time is now 27 seconds. The best breakout time seen is 27 seconds. The average breakout time is half an hour. So we need both. Okay, so can I tell you that that microsegmentation is more important than quicker detection? Probably not. Probably not. You need both. But I'm also aware of the fact that every organization has budgetary constraints. They have priorities, and so sometimes you're kind of stuck. So I'm always concerned for all my CISO friends, and I've been doing this for a long time, and so I have many CISO friends, and they're always complaining about not having enough money, being asked to do more with less. And now with AI, making the life really, really difficult. So sometimes, our advice to our customers is when you're trying to reduce the blast radius, maybe focus on your key crown jewels. Start there. Okay, start there. Start with your key crown jewels. Make sure that is done. And then now with the tools like Illumio, it's easy to implement. It's easy to deploy. It's not as complicated as it could be or was once. If you try to do this kind of stuff. So the product is simple. You can install it easily. And then with on the detection side with Bell Cyber's autonomous SOC, we've created what I think is the first autonomous SOC in the world. And so that is allowing us to detect things a lot quicker. So the autonomous SOC allows you to detect things a lot quicker. Illumio allows you to reduce the blast radius. So I think a little bit of both are going to get us a long way for enterprises to have a good security system in place to defend themselves, and also to reduce their damage in the event of a breach.
And John,
does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah, those things are symbiotic. I mean, they work together. right? So if you had, say, Illumio microsegmentation, it would give you a bunch of telemetry called insights that would give you knowledge about things that you need to do that a human then could take action on in very quick order to stop something bad from happening or something bad from potentially happening, because there's always going to be precursors to the attack, right? There's going to be reconnaissance, there's going to be other things. So before the actual payload gets dropped. And so I think that understanding how things work together systemically is certainly very important. We tend to look at all of these things as a singular system detached from every other system, but it's a system. It works together coherently, and that's the value of this, right? So, you know, if you're not thinking of it as a system, but you're thinking of it as individual products, that's where you're going to fail, because you're going to have bad policy, you're going to have bad visualization, you're not going to have good processes around how to respond to anything that's going on. And so you definitely have to think of these things as one whole, right? I mean, just like, you know, any sport has multiple players playing different positions, they all have to work together in order to win the game.
No, that's a great point, you know, and something that Bell Cyber has been doing for the last 10 years is something what we call the cybersecurity mesh architecture, to make sure that there are no silos. Everything is integrated. And I think that has worked very well for us. And matter of fact, that's one of the reasons that we were able to integrate AI so easily, because the system was fully integrated. And even to, I thought nobody's thinking about silos, but even today people are still thinking about silos. And in large organizations, especially, you have the network team and all they're thinking about are network tools. And then you have the server team and all they're thinking about are server tools. So inherently, they're siloed, and inherently, they're all concerned about, should I spend money on my tools or should I share this with other departments within the enterprise? So it's sometimes I think the deck is stacked against security people. You know, this.
This happened to me recently. I was talking to somebody. I don't care about network security because I'm the cloud person. I said, well, you know, there's networks in the cloud. And they went, what? It hadn't occurred to them that clouds contain networks. They're networks, you just don't own them, right? So you still have to be concerned with network security, even if you are the cloud person, right? So you have to think about, you have to work together with all your peers to solve these problems. You can't just do, well, cloud security is fine. I mean, it's probably not. It's really hard to do, you know, but still, yeah, it's one system.
I
That's
think
right. Yeah.
both of you are so well in tuned. You're actually following like the agenda for this presentation perfectly. My next questions were actually going to be like, many organizations have invested in tools, in platforms, but what we hear from executives often is not what do I buy next, but how do I operate differently? And both of you just answered the exact same question, like how are we changing the mentality that we have, that silo approach. We're trying to share information. We've built that mesh architecture, and all of getting all of that those connections in place, so that when the attackers are attacking at machine speed, we can have that information. We can defend at machine speed as well. So, John, I have a couple of questions for you. We've already talked about, having attacks and being able to be prepared for a breach, and feeling like, when something goes wrong, what do we have to do what do we have to do to fix it? And I think AI has shifted a lot of how organizations approach this problem. And when we are putting together the Bell Cyber ASOC, how do we make all of these connections come together? How do we make it more practical for organizations? And how do we collapse all of those silos and really develop that different mindset?
So first of all, the ASOC is, to come back to the silver bullet analogy, the ASOC is not a silver bullet. Okay, the ASOC is solving a key problem in operations. Okay, the ASOC, because of the amount of telemetry coming at analysts, it is making the life of the security analyst, the operation analyst, unbearable. They're getting so many things, and what they're also getting, they're getting a lot of false positives because of the way the SIMs operate, the way the EDRs operate, the way the SASEs operate. And so what the ASOC is doing, it is now using AI to eliminate false positives, to do the all the context, to figure out the context, to figure out what needs to happen, and by making a decision whether it's a true positive or false positive. So what the ASOC is doing, it's taking this humongous workload that has been the bane of the existence of SOC analysts for the last 30 years, dealing with tons of telemetry, dealing with tons of false positives. And so what the ASOC is doing something very specific. It's saying, okay, you don't need to worry about all these false positives. So now, instead of worrying about looking at 100 alerts, of which 99 are false positives, now you only look at one alert that's a true positive. And then what the ASOC is doing, we're going one step further. We're saying, okay, we have one true positive. Let's do the containment action. Do I need to block a port on a firewall? Do I need to take a workstation off the network? So now the ASOC is first of all solving all the false positives, but even for the few true positives, it's now taking the containment action. So we have taken the whole burden of operations off the backs of the security analysts. And that's the way. It's not solving all the problems. It's not solving the problem of zero trust, and it's not solving the problem of microsegmentation, but it's solving a very specific problem, and a problem that has been very difficult to resolve without adding more and more and more people. Because as the tools become more advanced, we're getting more telemetry, and as we get more telemetry, we're getting more correlation and more false positives, and the data, the volume of data has just been increasing and increasing and increasing. And it's not going to stop. I don't see the volume of data stopping anytime soon. And now with everything going to the cloud and all these applications and all these AI agents running around, the telemetry is just getting crazy. So the ASOC is now solving this problem of reviewing all this telemetry, figuring out what are false positives, eliminating the false positives, figuring out what are true positives, and then taking the action needed, and hopefully in seconds, not in minutes, not in hours, and certainly not in days.
I think that's a really important point, because people always assume that autonomy means we're removing people from cybersecurity, but that's actually not the case at all. It allows people to stop spending endless time chasing alerts, like you were said, the mental fatigue, the overload, and really just focuses them on making more informed decisions, and being able to find that when that one true positive is found after the AI has basically gone through all of those thousands of alerts, to really be able to identify what are the next steps, how to help the customer go forward from there, and use their time in a better way. And that naturally, brings us to the autonomous SOC, and the whole idea of being able to remediate as well with the AI. And I think one of the principles that we've discussed as part of this zero trust is that we're trying to reduce the amount of time it takes for us to control things, to reduce the impact of incidents. And I wanted you to talk a little bit more about really how AI-powered defense at at machine speed is really helping us to reduce that blast radius. So if you can just talk a little bit more about that.
I think what AI is doing is it's all a question is overload. Okay, we're being overloaded with information every day, and the SOC analysts are overloaded with information, and then they overloaded information. They're trying to triage events, and then they spend all the time triaging something to determine it's a false positive. Okay, and then so we spent hours every day triaging stuff that is a false positive. So that's a tremendous waste of human expertise. And so what we're trying to do with AI powered, with our ASOC and trying to do things at machine speed, is we're trying to take this burden off the analyst and saying, you know what, AI can now determine whether this is a true positive, false positive. And if it's a true positive, it can take on the work. So that is what we're doing. It's a very simple concept. It's I like to think it's not rocket science, but sometimes I think our ASOC is rocket science. Okay, it is rocket science because we have spent almost 30 months trying to figure out, make sure that we've got the AI agents configured and running, and the supervisor agents configured and running at optimum speeds and optimum power. And so that's kind of what we've done. So I think the ASOC is for analysts who are fed up of looking at false positives. And if we can just eliminate, I was talking to a customer the other day, and I said I've eliminated false positives. Because anybody who's been in the SOC business, and John will validate this, is that we're dealing with false positives all the time. The majority of the time you're dealing with false positives. Right, John?
Oh yeah, that's why I said those red lights become green lights, man, because you're just tired of just chasing your tail all the time. It's exhausting to be a SOC engineer back in the turn of the century. It was exhausting, because the technology was so limited in terms of what you could see. But here's the thing, right? The SOC and the AI powered SOC that you're talking about sets in step 5 of Zero Trust, monitor and maintain, where you get all this telemetry. The amount of telemetry that we get now is so much richer than we could back in the day. Back in the day when I started, I was monitoring just IDSs, which were unidirectional. I'm not even seeing both sides of the connection, right? And I'm trying to make a decision, is that a bad thing or a good thing? I have no idea. Nobody else does either. And so now we have so much rich telemetry, and we can send that into these AI-enabled systems. That's where AI, somebody's asking about where is AI being used in Zero Trust. It's being used in step 5 primarily. It's also being used in all other steps, step 1 and 2, to determine your protect surface and map the transaction flows. And if you get a demo from Bell Cyber on Illumio, you'll see that. You'll see these transaction flow maps, and you'll see how easy it is to visualize what's happening in your environment. But then all of that telemetry then goes into your SOC, right? And it's not just the telemetry from Illumio, it's the telemetry from your firewall, it's the telemetry from your cloud, it's the telemetry from all this stuff. And the computational ability of AI is so powerful that it can sort through and just shuck out all the stuff that's useless that would have taken a human being hours and hours and hours to know that, right? And so that's really where we're seeing the advantage. And I've talked about this. I wrote about this for the Financial Times in London, why I'm not losing sleep over AI, because I think it actually ultimately will give us an advantage over the attackers, because they're going to be confined to using, the ports and the protocols and the systems and the TCP/IP and all that stuff. And so we'll be able to see everything that they're doing. There's nothing that can be invisible anymore, right? And if you're looking for it, you can absolutely find it. and then you can remediate it, you can stop it, and you can update the policy, and you can make the system anti-fragile, right? So if you've ever read the book Anti-Fragile by Taleb, he talks about systems that improve under stress. And, he talks about resilience or robustness resists stress, but it stays the same. Anti-fragile systems gets better and better under stress. And that's what we're doing in Zero Trust. The more stuff that Bell Cyber sees in their autonomous SOC, the more they're able to update the policy, the more they are able to fine tune what should go in the protect surface. All those things, the more they're able to see the flow mapping and how things work together, and the more they're able to make it better and better over time. It's anti-fragile. It's not resilient. It's not robust. It goes beyond that, and that's the exciting thing to happen, in the past few years.
I know we just have a few more minutes. You wanted to just, talk about the books that John Kinderberg is.
Yes, sure. Let's do that. I was actually just going to say that.
Yeah.
So I think what we want to do is just feature some of the work that John has been doing in this area around Zero Trust. You can see the QR scan codes here. If you'd be interested in learning a little bit more about Zero Trust, if you're on your Zero Trust journey and you're looking for the pitfalls and what else has to be done to cross this hump. I think this is a great read, and you can just scan these QR codes, and obviously we'll also share the deck after the webinar, and you can definitely use them to
John,
on your Zero Trust journey.
any last words of wisdom for our audience?
We're at the golden age of cybersecurity, where people are being forced to take it seriously. It's not just a nice to have, it's a must have. And Zero Trust is becoming a must have. And so we're seeing in the guidances around Mythos and AI, we're seeing various countries, various organizations all recommend build a Zero Trust environment, segment your network. Cloud Security Alliance said, you have a choice, Zero Trust or 0 days. It's a great line. It's a pithy statement. Zero Trust or 0 days, your choice. And so, you can't stand on the sidelines anymore and wait to see what happens, because you're in the middle of the game, whether you wanted to play it or not.
That's great. Thanks very much, John. And just from Bell Cyber, I just want to thank you for spending some time with us and our customers and our friends on this webinar. It's a fascinating time. So thank you very much, and appreciate you participating.
Hey, great to talk to you again, John, and great to work with the folks over at Bell Cyber. Thank you very much for all the people who joined in, and hope that you got some value from it.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Have a great afternoon.